Here in 1809, new cards were assigned to everyone. Should be down here. Some were discarded. The French have quite a hand, something like 9 cards. The coalition only has about 6, I think. Because the coalition needs its cards more for the military operations. The French can just move Napoleon for one. They didn't really have any diplomacy they wanted to do, and it's kind of tough. There's not a lot that they really feel like they had an advantage trying to do diplomacy on. Some of the minors maybe they could strip away, but it's an expensive card for taking a core away, basically. The French, on the other hand, tried to do diplomacy, and here's something that's left up in the air. What happens if both sides try to do diplomacy on the same country at the same time? So, for example, Egypt, that might happen. But anyway, the French went for Denmark this time instead of Egypt. The forces are closer, they get an extra navy out of it, and if they can get the Hanseatic League, which should be pretty easy, honestly, in addition to Denmark, they get a bonus. And then I realized, wow, what about protectorates? There are some that are available for me. Saxony and Naples I could create. Well, I spent another card, discarded, kind of a cool river crossing card. I got rid of this foul weather as well, which was kind of useless this turn, except for points, to convert Naples. And that boosted both the victory and the escalade level. Remember, once escalade hits 15, I think. Yeah, this is the victory points in 1809. Once the escalade hits 15, we add the new deck in, but we haven't been really pushing that too hard. It's been, it's 1809, and so far Britain and Prussia are the only countries which have surrendered. At this point, otherwise, what have we had? We've had Austria and Prussia both surrender. I think that's it at this point in time. So we're a little behind in terms of those, I guess, but with Britain, who knows? Anyway, let's see what our next steps are. Now we get, I missed the budget phase. Alright, we gotta build the troops. I don't think it affects much. Okay, so now as we look at production, the Turks built some stuff. Spain doesn't have anything they can build. We go to Prussia. They're at peace, but they still get to build as a neutral. Now, their base is 5, and the question is whether or not they get hit for 4 by Warsaw. I think the answer is no. I don't think Warsaw counts as such. Again, it's not special. There's no special case in the rules for this that I could find. But Prussia's down to 1 core point per turn for the rest of time, as long as Poland exists, if that's the case. And I don't think that historically reflects Prussia's power. Yes, they had trouble with their manpower at this point, but I don't think Poland was their main source of manpower. And in fact, you take it away from, if they lose Königsberg, now they can't lose that permanently. And that's kind of the weird thing with this. We never assessed Warsaw against them before. It was Berlin that was captured that took their points away. The question, of course, is whether or not Berlin alone, whether Warsaw should even count, whether it was a necessary location. I think it was, and I think had Warsaw been held, but now it's no longer part of Prussia, as it were. So they can't be penalized for it. Because when you're at peace, you should get your full points. You shouldn't be able to lose key centers. That's not allowed in the rules in general. And with the redeployments done, John moved up. Charles now has a much larger army. Turks holding the Austrian border. Bennigsen's now in charge of the Russian army. I have Bagration here, but I also have Barclay de Tolly. who's a Cav general, which is the main reason he's there. Napoleon's pulled the Poles down into himself. Davout has a new force here in Switzerland threatening Charles's line. And then Massena has gathered the Italian forces together. This is our last turn before England comes back in the war. So, we had better make it count. Interesting point in the game and an interesting choice. Like I said, the French kind of want to make the most of this situation because right now England's still out of the war, but they're coming in next year. Now I have this Fouche card. Fouche. No idea. Which is a 3-point card. And you hate to lose a 3-point card. It's a one-time thing. But it allows me to get rid of an enemy non-permanent card at random. Get rid of one of their cards. They only have 6 cards total. This would be... And, yeah, no, they did not spend on diplomacy. And... this would reduce the number of cards that they have available and make them very, very weak in terms of what they can do. And then it doesn't just throw that card away, or throw it into their discard, but I get to use it. So I don't lose, 3 points worth of card. Unfortunately, from my point of view, losing a 3-point card is probably more of a big deal. And also, I don't really know what the punishments cards are, but I suspect they're worse for France overall. This is the period where France was struggling more diplomatically and militarily than they are in this era. So I can't imagine that those cards are in general as good for the French. So I'd rather hold on to these earlier cards. That's the kind of decision making that I don't think really belongs in a war game. It's, this kind of deck management type stuff that's really hard to justify. Yeah, you can do some hand waving about, well, I'm expending resources that I could have held on to and developed better or whatever. I don't know. Okay, well, I have a cool card actually, which is this Schulmeister. I can take an enemy force and move it out of my way. And I also have this one that gives a penalty in combat. Oh no. This is weird. It says activation, but it's actually an event that you play in reaction to an opponent's actions. It's not quite a combat card, but it's close. So I think it's kind of miscategorized. Anyway, with those two advantages, I want to take Bennigsen down. The first way of taking him down would be if I can force him to battle and beat him. The second way is make him walk back in Russia. You can't take any attrition rolls from this, but I can run him further from my base of operations, perhaps late in the turn, and march down, because Austria is my goal this turn. I want to get the Erfurt peace, get the Confederation of the Rhine going. And I've got a hard time advancing anywhere here in Austria. Unfortunately, by doing what I did, which was just taking the single point and using Napoleon to march forward, I've given up the opportunity to advance with Davout, and that's going to give Charles a chance to do something. He could have had his supply cut by Davout, which would have been kind of an obnoxious move, and probably the brighter move at this point. Charles marches in, hoping to catch Soule, and Soule evades. So now I've got options. Do I establish this siege and hope I can take it? And then, gee, what do I really gain from that? Or do I double back and try to fight Davout? It's really a hard situation. I think Davout is the more important at this point. So that was 1, 2. We'll come in after Davout. I'm not sure whether or not he's evading. He's forced into battle and forced to retreat, indeed. No demoralization or anything. And that puts Napoleon in a tougher place because Charles has kind of outmaneuvered one this little engagement. How long it's going to last, it's hard to tell. He's got the stronger force, and there's nothing I can do short of bringing the army of Italy up to face him. So in addition to Soule moving to kind of outflank Charles here and possibly threaten his supply, but it's a tough job because he doesn't have to take the, he does have to take the Tyrol. There's a pass there. So he's got a couple of fortresses he has to take to cut the French, the Austrians off of supply, and that's a problem, because if Switzerland falls, that's the fall of a protectorate, which, if it ends up being conquered, it loses a victory point, and then the French have to spend effort to get it back, get that victory point back, and then also they cause another escalade point, which of course is what the coalition kind of wants to happen now, I think. Over here, Napoleon charged into Russia chasing Bennigsen's army. In Russia now, there's 10 or more steps, so the Russians play the Holy Russia card, and that's going to allow some additional forces to be raised. So Bennigsen's army's bigger, and we've got Chigatachov in place. Unfortunately, Chigatachov shows up with some militia. I put some in the army, and I put some down with him. And I don't have a terribly good thing to do. Remember, those can only stay within Russia itself. I get a free activation here. What do I want to do with that free activation? Well, what I think I'm going to do actually is set him up a little differently. I'm going to give the militia here and take, the 11th Corps is one of the ones he has. And I'm going to try to force march to get behind Napoleon and start causing him problems. Because Napoleonic supply has to be traced here through Lublin. What I notice is interesting is you don't have the capacity to give the Lithuanian territories to Poland. Now, historically it was never done, but later on it was. A big slice, maybe not all of Lithuania. It's kind of hard. Yeah, all of Lithuania, I think, was given to Poland after World War I. Now, it would have been conceivable that a greater Polish territory would have been carved out there than historically was done if Russia is defeated. It may be seen as an unimportant thing. It's something that Empires in Arms, as one example, definitely gives as an advantage there. War and Peace doesn't really worry about it. They just really have you just need Warsaw and you get Poland out of it. Actually, Empires in Arms also gives you Podolia as an option. Don't think it gives you White Russia, but I'm not sure. But there's just a whole ton of stuff that you can give to the Poles. What was historically given was part of Galicia. And again, maybe more of Galicia would have been capable to be formed into a Poland. It's a hard call whether or not you want to, project those kind of what-ifs. Anyway, this would be Napoleon's supply line, so I want to cut that. That's going to require a big forced march. Like a three-pointer, I think. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, just 2 points. 1, 2. I don't know if I really want this militia closer. 3, 4, 5. And I unflag this. I don't take it. And now I have to pay for that forced march. That's 2 spaces of forced march. I'm only 4 strength points. It's a poor zone. That gives me +2. This is not going to be pleasant. Drop it by 1 for the Russians. They like bad weather. +3. think that's it. I get a 4, I get a star. 4, 5, or 6, I lose a step. That wasn't too painful. It wasn't too painful for causing some definite problems. The real question was, did I want to use 2 real units for this? Because those guys are pretty much dead. Napoleon's going to strike back at them, obviously. French play this Schulmeister card, and it's gone now, to the effect of having Charles pick up camp and head home. Let's see, how did he head back? He headed from Zurich into Tyrol and then up into Bavaria. Just to put him kind of off balance, not being able to easily siege this, etc. It's a pretty annoying use of the card. Probably more annoying than using it against the Ruskies. And speaking of the Ruskies, that card allowed Napoleon to have an activation. He swept around to Lublin. The Russians withdrew, but then he caught them in this unnamed wilderness here and just destroyed them. However, he took 3 steps of losses from attrition doing that, and the Grand Army is not so grand anymore. It still should be sufficient, though, to take Bohemia, threaten Vienna. The only problem is, if it moves this way, the Russians can come forward and threaten Prussia, or Poland. And you know, then it becomes kind of a race. Hey, what's going to happen? Is Napoleon going to bat back and forth, trying to, you know, use his interior lines or whatever? Chucky chased Soule out of Baden and retook it, but now Napoleon comes swinging back down, and he's banked a number of points. The intention being, you know, maybe to force Charles to march back towards Vienna, or the Turks, and either one of those can release some forces that are kind of pinned in place right now. He pushes down towards grabbing Prague. Bennigsen comes forward and starts sieging things in his direction. I have the drums of war, so I can keep this alive. Alternatively, if I don't want to go that far yet, I also have a winter campaign which might allow me to sneak a turn in that the French weren't expecting. This is sort of working. Napoleon did a forced march using the genius of a Napoleon card and set up a siege of Vienna. Now, 2 things have to happen. 1, he can't get pushed out of Vienna. And 2, he's got to succeed in the siege roll at the end of the turn, in which case Austria will surrender. But that's cutting it a little close, right? The other side of this, though, is I used the other 2 points not to move these, because, hey, if Austria surrenders, Charles is no problem. And if they don't surrender, I really don't want to waste my strength against him. I don't want to get run down. He's got a bigger force. I'd be crossing a river. Let him come to me. So I used my 2 extra points I had banked to move some navies to face the English next turn. But little do I know that the Allies are going to extend the turn. Actually, it might be a bad idea to extend the turn, for the simple fact that that gives Napoleon another opportunity to siege. So I don't think I'm going to do that. I think instead, we'll see if I can do something with that interior lines and just end it there. Turkish attempt to relieve the siege of Vienna fails. Hey, haven't we seen this before? Except it wasn't the Poles. Never mind. Everybody's on the wrong side here. And that's because the British, or the coalition, is not going to do... Oh, they have 1 point left. I probably want to move something. There's a lot that I'd want to move. I'll drop some of these feudals. I'm not sure what's up with the feudals, but let's see. 2, 4, 6, 8. I can slide some of them into the demoralized army as well. I think that's better than moving this Russian force forward 2 spaces, which doesn't do me a whole hell of a lot either. That can be strategic movement. Of course, so could this. So, you know what? I think that's a point. I I'm not sure what limitations there are on the feudal forces. That's the problem. So I've got to leave my general behind because I can't command him, but I can move this. I can always grab the general next turn. The French didn't play a winter card, so I don't think they have one from what I can tell. Maybe they have one in the punishment deck. And that's going to put us up to the end of turn phase, the inner phase or whatever. No, the end of activation phase stuff. Okay, so entering 1810, new counters, Clinton shows up as a British general. I didn't even realize he was involved in the Napoleonic Wars. But following that, Schwarzburg shows up. Now, it's interesting, he replaces Charles. Historically, this is perfectly reasonable, but this is one of the facets of this game I don't like, which is that it's all scheduled when the leaders come in. Charles's removal had to do with his failure. Now, I'm willing to accept that allowing Napoleon to take Vienna was enough to remove Charles. And Schwarzenberg probably wouldn't be that important a general. Again, I prefer how some other games handle this, triggering it to the events of a surrender, or a second surrender, or in EIA, you specifically remove a leader. They also rate Schwarzenberg pretty damn well. He's as good as Charles, and in fact a little better because he can command more units. Commanding more units makes sense. He was probably the best of the able to command a coalition of different armies, of different nationalities in his army. But his field effectiveness has not been considered very high. Whereas Charles, first of all, in that 1809 campaign that got him sacked, probably fought the hardest campaign, the best fought campaign against Napoleon, where it wasn't a matter of overwhelming force, or, you know, hey, look, I got a lot of territory I can give you that you're going to die in. Charles fought a very masterful campaign there, and some of the battles was very effective at causing a great deal of damage to the Grand Army in a way that nothing before or after really did until Waterloo. Yeah, against the Grand Army itself, yeah. In Spain, Wellington was pretty damn effective as well. But anyway, I find there are reasons to say Charles was not that great a commander at times, but he was also, I think, on the whole, more effective than Schwarzenberg. But that's the kind of thing, that's why leaders are kind of cool in a game, because you can kind of look at it and say, wow, I'm not sure I buy that. Anyway, England's back in the war, and we're ready to set up 1810. The armies rebuild, and you can see where this is going to be a problem. So, like, the Russians have another big force showing up down there, which is going to be able to strategic move and be in position to start chewing away some of the French gains in the east. Likewise, the Austrians have revitalized their army. They're basically one corps short of everything now. This is why France needs to beat them in one turn, because they can rebuild. Now, the French can rebuild quite a bit too. It's not a game where, you know, the French aren't able to put most of their army on the field. They've got they got quite a bit here still, but their production doesn't match Austria plus Russia, and that's the real problem here. And meanwhile, the Prussians are building up their army. The English don't have much in the way of an army, but they have their entire navy, and the French have their entire navy as well, I believe. So, you know, we're going to see another showdown, but here, instead of like last time, there's no grand army ready to invade England. So whatever the English managed to do is going to be pretty effective. And we've been perhaps watching the Empire pile, and we're pretty sure we have the Continental system card in the French hands. We haven't seen it discarded. I had my Austrians over in my Prussian box. They have an army now. The Turks got to revitalize their army a little bit as well. And it's just really looking tough for Napoleon, mainly because he doesn't have a trace route back home, does he? Yeah, maybe he did. Because we have Silesia. I didn't count on that. So we get this Saxony. That gets a... Yeah, actually, I might be switching some of my French builds around, because if I have any damage... No, I didn't leave any damaged units over there. That's the problem. You kind of want counters scattered all over the place, or at least a couple of damaged counters in your armies so you can build up your army. And that's not a situation that I'm in right now. So Napoleon's facing some fairly large forces, the Turkish army and then Bellegarde's force as well, right in the heart of Austria. And if chances are he'll be able to defeat them, but it's not like he'll be able to get an Austrian surrender till the end of the year. There's no sort of mid-year diplomacy that'll take place. Speaking of which, we are in the diplomacy step. Oh, by the way, English already had their navy built, so they used their bonus. First of all, they used their money to build an army, but they used their bonus to take an extra card. And I think they're at 9 for the coalition, and the French are at 8. So it's gotten kind of close now. Okay, so I'm having trouble, and I've been having trouble with this throughout the game, with the diplomacy timing. One player doesn't, there's no explanation that one player goes before the other. One might assume a lot of things here, like the French get the first shot at diplomacy because they tend to be the first player. Yep. No, first the coalition gets to do it. Okay. So this is not in the diplomacy rules, unfortunately. It's only in the sequence of play, which I generally don't use as a source of my rules, and it often will confuse me if it's done that way. The new rules are exactly the same. I think there are so few changes in them. There's a couple of modifiers. Now, I did pony up and pay the 10 euros, 5 euros for the rules and 5 for shipping outside of France. To get the upgrade kit, it's not going to fix the counter issue, the one where there's a problem and probably nobody's noticed it. I don't think many people actually play this game. But it does add a couple of player aids, and it gives you duplicates of some of the other stuff. An extra rule book can be handy. You know, I can pen in where there's changes or make a little notation that there's changes, because obviously I can't use a pencil on this glossy rule book. But it seemed worthwhile. I probably could have just printed out the play aid, the additional play aids. But I'm a richer person than I once was. Anyway, so we do have an answer to that. The coalition gets the first shot at diplomacy. This is important because the French were considering diplomacy against Prussia, who's... Nope, Prussia's not in yet. I thought they were in the war at this point. Yeah, but they were considering it. They have the Talleyrand card, and it's like... Saxony had no steps on the board. They're susceptible to diplomacy, and England played their crappy intrigues card. It's a fine card to get out of your hand. It doesn't give you any more than a pass would, essentially, than not playing a card, the 1 point. They played that, and they switched Saxony's allegiance. Big deal? Not terribly, but I didn't want to hold that card in my hand for a better opportunity, say, against Prussia. And, you know, what other options do I really have? I could have converted... this is all national territory, so I can't touch that. I can't touch the protectorates. So the only other option was actually Württemberg, which looked less valuable. Saxony cuts the French supply line for the Grand Army going back. They're still in supply from Poland, but they're not going to get French replacement points as long as it's there, or something. Plus, I can build Saxons up. It's in a quiet area of the war, so we'll get a chance for that. And at the end of redeployment, we have Schwarzburg and Bellegarde have sort of swapped. I'm actually not sure that's legal. It might be that I need to have one or the other, one space further out. I'll look that up. Let's see, 7.6. Exchanges of units are possible with generals in the same zone. No. What's not clearly spelled there is whether or not, when stacking takes effect, as it were, whether or not you can swap forces the way that I did. I'm going to allow it, but I could see an argument being made that that shouldn't be allowed, because you couldn't do it during the normal movement except maybe during a major campaign card. Russians have pushed forward, Turks have brought their reinforcements into play, Spain's prepared to go violate English territory, Danes moving forward. But I guess, and then the big effect is the French, who've moved to cut off Bellegarde's position. You have Saint-Cyr up here, threatening the supply lines through Bavaria, and you have Davout in the same sort of position. Ney disappeared somehow. He ran into somebody else's space and said, yeah, I don't want to be on the board anymore. Which is fine, because all that's left are the Swiss, who I'm putting into the Italian army if the Italian army takes losses. The position looks pretty bad for Napoleon, to tell you the truth. The slow rate at which, not being able to take Austria out last turn has put me in a really ugly position where I've got the English as a threat. Now, they're probably not going to do anything navally, but the biggie is Napoleon's cut off back here, not out of supply per se. And that's one of the reasons Saint-Cyr is so important, because he's kind of reestablishing the line back to France. But I've got Russians coming in threatening Poland. I've got, what else? I've got Schwarzenberg's army prepared to hit me in Vienna. It's just a really unpleasant looking situation. Something that looks like it belongs more in 1813 than in 1810 here. The French can't really decide what they want to do. They have a lot of points in their hand. I'm going to play this Fouche card in order to deprive the coalition of some cards. This does get rid of a good deck card, and that's kind of a shame, but I've got, I just did a reshuffle. So I drew a random card. I don't know what it is. It's the Holy Russia card. That means that I get the 2 points that this would generate, and that's what I actually wanted, was at least 2, because that'll let me fire off the siege with Napoleon and then move Davout to screw around with Belgrade. The coalition wasted another card on an attempted interception by Bellegarde. Now he's kind of stuck out here. He can't get supply out of Baden. It's an ally of his, but it doesn't have a fortress, so it doesn't work. And so he's kind of cut off from supply, and it's going to be a tough job. Now, there was also an opportunity to intercept Napoleon as he entered here. He swung around, grabbed Poniatowski and the supplies, and moved into this location to kind of, after successfully sieging Vienna. That leaves the path to Warsaw open, which is kind of scary, but that's okay. And there's a lot of concentration facing against the Austrians, but of course the Austrians should have fallen last turn, so I don't know how big a deal that is, but it opens up a lot of interesting questions for the coalition. Among them, hey, do I really want to blockade and use my boats at this point? I've got one card, the Admiralty card, that'll allow me to do that. I can do that at any time, though, even in the winter turns. It's not beyond the ice line. It's here, and that's it. Schwarzburg leaves Napoleon alone back here and does a quick march over to smacks Davout. And really, an army against a non-army, assuming they're both full up, is not a fair contest. You have odds in this game, and you're just too potent. And so we actually got a demoralization there because we did like 4-1 losses. That's +3 to the demoralization factor. Now, that meant because he's demoralized, I'm not in as much a hurry to get Bellegarde out of Baden. He can hold off Soule. I have to worry about Saint-Cyr slipping down, but Schwarzenberg can handle that, I think. Maybe with an interception. If he tries to cut my supply line back to Salzburg. So I decided to hold with that and move some Russians forward. And we took Brest-Litovsk and have started moving forward. You know, it's a slow hike, though, because we have to capture the territory. It's not even just moving. And you don't want to force march through that crap. The French putting pressure on England, everything's land-based now. Nobody wants to spend the amount of points required to conduct naval operations. So Massena moved across and attacked the Turkish army, was defeated by it, and then chased by it with this major campaign as part of the major campaign. Other effects in the major campaign, Bennigsen moving up, grabbing some of the Austrian territory back. Kutuzov has taken Warsaw. If he can pick up Thorn, I believe that Poland will fall if it's still, you know, all held by the end of the turn. And that's kind of a big deal because there's a penalty when the coalition takes back one of the protectorates. They take victory points away. And they don't raise the escalade, but if the French want to get those victory points back, they have to push the escalade forward again. French side, Napoleon marched up, gathered up Saint-Cyr's forces, and put himself in a position threatening the Austrian army's supply. Austria had to spend a big card in order to first pull Schwarzenberg back. I'm never sure. Yeah, Schwarzenberg. And then Napoleon tried to intercept that and threw away a big card. This was an expensive opportunity, but had an interception succeeded, I would force Schwarzenberg to attack. I would have an advantage. Interception gives you an advantage in this game. And cut off Bellegarde. So that seemed like a really good plan, but it was only like a 50-50 shot. Napoleon failed an interception, so Bellegarde is now back trying to take Vienna. And meanwhile, we got the Russians, having already taken Warsaw. They just have to take Thorn and also clearing up some of the space in the back areas. If this succeeded and I pretty much destroyed or wrecked the Austrian army, then Napoleon could march back, maybe take care of the Turks on the way, because he's so fast, and defeat the Russians. But now it looks like, wow, I've got to actually take the active hand in fighting against the Austrians here. Interception is such an expensive choice that you're really able to kind of challenge the other player. So like with Schwarzenberg moving in here, hey, you want to throw a card? Well, for Napoleon, it's not that big a deal to throw a card. But what if Napoleon marches into here? Bellegarde's best option might be to intercept, but it costs a 2 card instead of just a 1 or whatever, and the coalition doesn't have a lot of cards left. So it could mean that they're left doing very little for the rest of the turn, and that could be very painful. On the French side, Soule challenges Schwarzenberg to come forward and intercept, which he doesn't. He grabs himself Baden and part of Bavaria, and he reinforces there. Napoleon destroys Bellegarde's army. Took a loss, though, that he didn't want to take. He was delivering a -1 on the die roll to the Austrians, and figured chances are I won't lose more than 1 step. I'm committing my Poles in this case. Let me throw the Guard Cav in. Well, the guard cav took a hit, and that's painful. But we also took the fortress, put the rest of the Poles in the fortress, and now we've cut Schwarzenberg off, and he's got problems, no matter what. Now, we could just go marching away and deal with the Russians at this point, because an out-of-supply Schwarzenberg probably isn't too much of a threat to anything. He can take his attrition check and get back in supply or something, but, you know, we may have enough time to go deal with the Russians. And the Russians, because I've been so busy with the Austrians, haven't been able to do anything. Again, the CDG problem. Coalition's in a very tight bind at this point, because cards I've played, whatever. I'm down to 2 cards. One of them, Drums of War, I may want, because it looks like Austria is going to surrender, but there's still a heck of an army in Austria. That might change. On the other side of things, Kutuzov might want to run up and take Thorn. Okay. Or Schwarzenberg, well, he's gotten himself out of supply, and that's kind of a problem. Maybe Bennigsen needs to come down and support. Or the Turkish army could try to clear a path through Napoleon there. But I don't have a lot of points. And what I definitely don't have points for is to move all my boats in the hopes of causing the French some problems. So we're going to spend that big 3-point card. We may end up saving some points. I got to try to decide how I can best get myself out of this situation. Just to activate Bennigsen, and all he managed to do was take Krakow. Now, I found I was cheating with him. I had my militia, which have this movement limitation. I don't think they're allowed outside of Russia. It's very hard to find anything in these rules, so I pretty much go by memory. They're so colorful and not terribly well represented. It's kind of like the GMT stuff. By the way, the current GMT rule set I'm reading, which is for Elusive Victory, is actually really, really good. It's a tough game and I'm having trouble getting a grasp of it, but man, the rules are among the most impressive I've seen from GMT. Anyway, this feels like I wasted a big card and didn't get what I needed out of it. I was hoping to take this fairly quickly and be able to march down and do something with Napoleon. So now I haven't taken Prussia. I haven't gotten Schwarzenberg out. I'm not heading anywhere in that direction, really. And I feel like I used 2 points for nothing, really. In order to avoid the pace of 1 card per day or whatever it is I'm doing, I might as well be playing by email at this rate. I play a second card. Napoleon goes and smashes into Schwarzenberg, and his army's not just demoralized, but cut in half basically by this attack. There's 7 step losses, the cav, everything else. There is still an Austrian army though, and there's a fair reason to suggest that the Drums of War card might be reasonable to play because of that. So now I've got a point and a second point. I think taking Poland out is probably the best that I can do at this point. So I'm going to spend my reserve point and my point for the turn to start the siege of Thorn. So Kutuzov is successful, surprisingly, and then the French do the dang fool thing of using their big card to sail out into the English Channel, and they're defeated. And then some of the blockade is beginning to be established against them. I also managed to defeat a Spanish ship in that fleet, which means that diplomacy against Spain is going to be possible next turn. I don't know quite how to mark that so that I can remember it. I suppose I can put this here and hope that that's good enough. I'm not sure. Now for the Allies, there isn't a whole hell of a lot that they want to do because they want to hold their card. They only have 1 point. Well, 1 point is enough to try to rally Schwarzenberg. Schwarzenberg isn't in supply and he's not going to be able to rally. He doesn't have enough movement points. He could get to here. That still won't get him in supply. So I don't think there's anything I really want to do. I can move some Russians a little bit forward. Can't take the space. Whatever. I guess that's about it. The problem is, if I move now, I take winter attrition from it in addition to the demoralization attrition. I'm better off just sitting there and starving where I am than than trying to starve twice, as it were. Okay, so we push on to kind of the end of turn stuff at the end of the activation, etc. Okay, a couple of misconceptions. One was that these guys would become undemoralized. They're not in supply, so that's not possible. So now they're kind of more hosed, which brings into question whether or not I want to play this. I have to make a decision. It does increase the escalade, which is nice, and it keeps Austria in the war. It means that Austria can be turned into a forced ally, but there's cards that allow Austria to come back once the escalade level is reached. I'm sure we're pretty far from that still, because Napoleon hadn't been doing as much. The other misconception was that Poland could be conquered. It can't. There's a special exemption here in red text, so of course I don't read it because that looks more like an example to me, which I always ignore. The Duchy of Poland is conquered only, there's too many colors in this, it's conquered only if France is conquered too. So I did not knock them out of the war. On the bright side, they won't be they won't be producing additional forces, because but I think they still count for the total number of miners with units that the French own. So the effect is that they can produce forces, but they won't be producing those awesome Polish units. Poniatowski, I think, gets integrated in with the French leaders. It's what it looks like. So, and no other miner has leaders, so that doesn't really affect things. And now I've got to decide, do I want to keep Austria in? Well, hell, why not? We'll play the drums of war. I've got to mark this somehow. Let's bump that up. I don't think there's a counter for it. Yeah, I don't see a counter for it. So I'm just going to put this over here, at least for a little while. That'll help remind me, if and when Austria actually does surrender, they won't be, they have some additional penalties on them from that. Additionally, the French are going to play Triumph of Erfurt. Prussia, can't, haven't defeated Austria. Oops. Okay, and we have to remember we can also do diplomacy against the Spaniards, but otherwise we are done with this year. Prussia can come back in, and we have some additional Prussian leaders. They don't remove anybody with them, and we'll load this one up.